So, I want you to picture a specific type of person. We all know one. Maybe you actually are one.
Oh, definitely.
Right. This is the person who, when everyone else is celebrating a new idea, popping the champagne, getting super excited about the future, they're the one sitting quietly in the corner, looking just a little bit
Concern.
exactly.
Because they're
The one who asks, but have we thought about what happens if the supply chain completely breaks down? Or, what if the client actually hates it?
Yeah, the buzzkill. Or at least that's the label they usually get stuck with. They're often described as reading the world through loss, which, I mean, it sounds incredibly heavy, doesn't it?
It does. It really sounds like they're walking around wearing gray-tinted glasses while the rest of the world is, wearing rose-colored ones.
But, and this is our hook for today's deep dive, what if that specific lens isn't a flaw? What if that ability to see the cracks, the endings, the whole what could go wrong scenario is actually a highly sophisticated superpower?
A superpower that basically keeps the rest of us from just walking straight off a cliff. Exactly. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cracking open another fascinating file from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment System.
Which, for those following along, is that incredible framework breaking down human behavior into distinct energy flows.
Right. And today, we are focusing entirely on one specific and honestly very misunderstood profile, the SSAU.
Also known by its very evocative name, the Sorrowful Thinker.
The Sorrowful Thinker. I have to say, of all the ME80 profile names, this one, it just hits the hardest. It makes you want to immediately find them, give them a hug, and tell them it's all going to be okay.
I mean, it creates a very specific, almost tragic image, doesn't it? But our mission today is to decode what that label actually means under the hood.
Right, getting past the surface level.
Exactly. We need to move past this idea that sorrowful just means being sad or depressed. We're going to look at the deep mechanics of how this personality processes data, how they handle risk, and why, honestly, if you are building a team, you desperately need one of them.
Just to ensure your own survival. So let's start at the very top. The ME80 system gives every single profile a core declaration. What is the headline for the SSAU?
It's almost poetic. The core declaration is, reads the world through loss, turning sighs into quiet understanding.
Wow. Turning sighs into quiet understanding.
Yeah.
I want to pause on that for a second because it makes a very specific distinction. Notice it doesn't say turning sighs into loud complaints. It's entirely internal.
Precisely. Their main operation mode is deep reflection and what the report explicitly calls emotion retracing.
Emotion retracing.
Right. While some people, like your high-energy extroverts, move through life constantly looking for the next win or the next big high, the sorrowful thinker is naturally attuned to what has been lost. Or, more importantly, what could be lost.
So they are basically the ones scanning the horizon for storm clouds while everyone else is, I don't know, putting on sunscreen.
That is the absolute perfect analogy. And they don't just see the cloud, they actually feel the barometric pressure drop before the storm even hits.
Oh.
The source material describes them as having this sort of sixth sense for potential unease before anything actually happens. They are extremely sensitive to environmental changes, minute relationship details, and emotional fluctuations.
I mean, just hearing that sounds exhausting.
It definitely can be, but it's also a form of incredibly high-level data collection.
Okay, so let's talk about the mechanics of this data collection. If something goes wrong, say a setback at work, a messy breakup, a failed project, what is their first instinct? What is the actual control mechanism happening here?
Their immediate instinct is inward questioning. They don't look around to pass the buck or blame others. They look at the situation strictly from their own angle to find the exact lines that prevented or failed to prevent the recurrence of that loss.
They want to know, what did I miss? Where was the flaw in my logic?
Exactly. It's a pure control mechanism. Their philosophy is, if I can deeply understand the loss, I can prevent it next time.
Which leads to one of the most fascinating mechanics of this profile. The ME80 report calls it pre-enacting.
Yes, pre-enacting.
Unpack that for us. Because it sounds like acting, but it's all happening inside their head.
Think of it like a highly advanced flight simulator. Before a sorrowful thinker takes any significant action, whether it's sending a risky email, investing money, or even just starting a difficult conversation, they walk multiple mental paths.
They're running the simulations.
Exactly. They look back at all their past data, and they simulate the future based on it.
So they are playing out the entire movie before they even agree to star in it.
And they aren't just visualizing the happy ending. They are actively emotionally rehearsing the outcomes where things go terribly wrong. They aren't just planning, they're literally feeling the potential failure.
Wait, so before they even sign a contract, they've already lived through the visceral version of the world where the deal totally collapses.
Correct, which is why they calculate. They do not rush. This pre-enacting makes them incredibly cautious when it comes to risk management. They aren't impulsive because they have already felt the sting of the consequences before making a move.
Well, that certainly explains the thinker part of their name. But let's look at the engine powering all of this. The ME80 system outlines an energy matrix for every profile. Where do they get the power to do all this heavy mental lifting?
When you look at their energy matrix, the report describes their general characteristic as having extremely strong inward absorption.
It's absorption, like a black hole.
No, not quite as destructive as a black hole. Think of it more like a high-capacity vault or a massive battery. Their strength doesn't come from external impact. They aren't the ones getting hyped up by cheering crowds.
Right.
Their strength actually comes from internal space stability and their pressure digestion capacity.
Pressure digestion capacity, I love that phrase. It implies they essentially eat stress for breakfast.
In a way, they really do. They can take in highly difficult emotions, incredibly complex problems, chaotic environments, and hold them all inside while they process everything. They stabilize the external system by absorbing the shock internally.
Okay, let's get into the weeds a bit here with the specific layers. The ME80 system breaks personality down into three core processing layers: the IP, the IQ, and the EQ. This is where we really see how the SSAU is wired.
Let's start with the IP layer.
The inner value layer.
Right. For the sorrowful thinker, the IP layer is defined as stable accumulation activation.
Stable accumulation. That sounds like my retirement portfolio strategy.
It's actually not far off from that. It basically means their core sense of personal value is built very slowly and steadily. They're absolutely not looking for a quick explosion of worth or their 15 minutes of fame.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. It's all about gathering, holding, and preserving. They accumulate wisdom, they accumulate observations. It is a very slow burn value system.
So they aren't the flash in the pan types. They're the ones pouring the concrete for the foundation. Now, what about the IQ layer? This is the emotional activation layer.
This is where the profile gets very nuanced. Their definition for the IQ layer is experience and verification judgment.
Wait, verification judgment. That sounds way too logical for an emotional layer.
But that's the key to understanding them. They do not just feel things blindly. Their emotional intelligence is fundamentally linked to verifying their current feelings against their past experiences.
Oh, I see.
When they feel a hunch, they immediately cross-reference it with their internal database. They think, I feel uneasy right now. Does this match the pattern of the last time things went south?
So they're essentially running a real-time audit on their own emotions.
Yes. They judge the actual validity of a feeling based on what they've already lived through. It makes their intuition highly data-driven, even if that data is entirely made up of emotional history.
That perfectly sets up the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer. And I have to admit, this one really surprised me when I was reviewing the sources.
The detachment aspect?
Yes.
Yeah.
The definition is emotional detachment and understanding. How can a sorrowful thinker, someone completely defined by feeling loss, be emotionally detached? Those seem like polar opposites.
It does seem contradictory at first glance. But think about a trauma surgeon. To actually save the patient, you have to care deeply. But in the moment, you also have to step back and look at the anatomy completely objectively.
You can't be weeping over the operating table.
Exactly. For the sorrowful thinker, to truly understand the mechanics of a situation, they have to detach. They step back from the immediate, blinding heat of the moment to analyze the underlying why.
That makes so much sense. So the sorrow is the raw input, but the detachment is the processing tool they use to handle it.
Beautifully put. They detach specifically to gain understanding.
And that brings us to the manifestation layer. This is the outward result, how they actually show up to the rest of the world.
The report states their energy operates inward carrying, absorbing, integrating.
Carrying, absorbing, integrating. I'm picturing that reservoir analogy again.
A deep reservoir is the perfect visual. They aren't projecting energy outward like a fire hose. They are taking things in and quietly integrating them into a larger whole. When you talk to an SSAU, you might get this profound feeling that they are listening deeper than most people.
Because they actually are.
Yes! They're actively taking your words, filing them away, and connecting them to everything else they know.
So we have this incredibly detailed profile of someone who is deeply reflective, absorbing everything, and constantly running mental simulations to avoid loss. Let's dig even deeper into their inner traits. The report specifically mentions reflection priority.
This is essentially their golden rule. It states, before continuing, think through loss clearly.
Before continuing, think through loss clearly.
Most people just want to move past a loss as fast as possible, right? They say, oh, well, that didn't work out. On to the next thing.
Just brush it under the rug.
Exactly. But the sorrowful thinker says, stop. Why did that happen? Let's review the entire cause and effect chain. They habitually find deep meaning in every single emotional fluctuation.
So they always prioritize understanding over speed.
Always. Clarifying why something is the way it is matters infinitely more to them than rushing forward. And this gives them a remarkably high understanding of complex situations. By the time they are actually ready to move, they understand the terrain better than anyone else in the room.
But, and there is always a but, when we do these deep dives, every single superpower has a shadow side. What happens when this deep, intensive reflection goes too far?
The shadow blind spot for the SSAU is called self-consumption.
Oof, that sounds dangerous. Like an engine just eating itself.
It really is. The core warning here is thinking too long slows steps down. When their reflection loses its boundaries, the sorrowful thinker can start to endlessly enlarge their problems.
The classic making a mountain out of a molehill.
Worse than that, honestly, a molehill becomes an indicator of an impending tectonic shift. A tiny, insignificant mistake is completely misread as a definitive sign of total systemic failure.
So they get stuck in a loop.
A severe loop of questioning their own fundamental value.
And I imagine that pre-enacting trait we talked about earlier can really backfire here too.
It's a massive backfire. The sources call it over-rehearsing worst outcomes. Imagine you have a major presentation coming up. The sorrowful thinker might vividly imagine failing, being laughed out of the room, losing their job, and they simulate this so intensely that they are completely exhausted before they even walk up to the podium.
They've already lived the trauma without it ever actually happening in reality.
Exactly. It completely drains their action energy, and if this behavior goes on long term, it morphs into self-negation.
How so?
They start internalizing external structural problems. They'll start thinking, the market crashed because I wasn't prepared enough, which is obviously illogical, but that's exactly where the downward spiral takes them. It causes their entire inner system to stall out.
So if you are a sorrowful thinker or if you manage one, you have to be hyper vigilant about that paralysis. You have to know when to finally flip the cutoff switch on the simulation and just start doing.
You absolutely need an external circuit breaker sometime.
Let's pivot to how they operate in the wild with other people. Socially, what is the everyday vibe of a sorrowful thinker? I'm guessing they aren't exactly swinging from the chandeliers.
Definitely not. The ME80 defines their social style as quiet observation. The specific phrase used is, they're there, but don't take light.
Don't take light, meaning they actively avoid the spotlight.
They don't steal the shine from others. They are typically very quiet, extremely courteous, and they heavily prefer to listen. But, and you can't forget this, they are constantly observing everything. Because of that high sensitivity we discussed, they pick up on emotional undercurrents that everyone else completely misses.
They are the ones who know a couple is secretly fighting, even though they are smiling and passing the wine at the dinner party.
Precisely. And this hyper-awareness provides what the report calls implicit safety for their relationships. You feel genuinely safe with them because you instinctively know they truly see you. They see all the nuance.
But I can easily see how that exact same trait could be totally misunderstood.
Oh, it causes a massive perception gap. Some friends will deeply appreciate that fine depth and feel incredibly understood. But others, they just feel the sorrowful thinker is a wet blanket who worries way too much. They might constantly say things like, why are you always so serious? Just lighten up.
Which probably drives the SSAU crazy.
Right, because that restraint is actually how they protect the relationship. They are quietly guarding the connection against risks the other person doesn't even realize exist.
That is such a helpful reframe. They aren't being wet blankets at all. They are being sentries. They're literally on guard duty for the people they care about.
Exactly. They are the watchtower.
So bringing this into the professional sphere, how do we monetize this? Let's talk business value. If I'm a CEO, why do I desperately need an SSAU on my executive team?
You need them for one massive, non-negotiable insight.
The canary in the coal mine.
They absolutely excel at tracking the root of a potential problem down to the smallest detail. Look, we live in a business world that is entirely obsessed with the fail fast and break things mentality.
Right, move fast, disrupt.
But the sorrowful thinker is the one looking at the blueprint saying, if we break this specific thing, here is the catastrophic chain reaction that will happen 3 months from now.
That kind of foresight is invaluable. It saves companies.
It does. They point out the hidden hazards long before a final decision is made. They act as the crucial warning label. And secondly, they are incredibly reliable emotion receivers within a corporate structure.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, if there is underlying tension in the team or really complex feelings about a new merger or a management change, they do not just brush it off. They treat those complex human feelings very seriously.
So they ensure the human element isn't ignored.
Exactly. They make sure the human side of the business isn't hastily processed or completely overlooked by management.
So they essentially keep the corporate ship from hitting the iceberg, and they simultaneously keep the crew from mutinying.
That is a brilliant summary of their business value.
Given all of that, the unparalleled risk insight, the deep logical analysis, the high empathy, what specific career fields fit this profile the best? The ME80 report lists a few key areas.
The first one is pretty obvious based on what we just said: risk assessment and quality management.
Oh, for sure.
Any role where the entire job description is to actively find holes in a rigorous established system. You absolutely want a sorrowful thinker packing your parachute before you jump.
Without a doubt.
What else? Then there is research, analysis, and planning. This leans heavily into that system-level sorting based on deep logic we talked about earlier. They have the sheer patience required to dig through mountains of data just to find the true narrative of why.
What about more people-focused roles? Do they fit there?
Surprisingly, yes. Psychological support and counseling is highly recommended.
Really? Even with a detachment?
Because of the detachment, actually. Coupled with their high empathy and their ability to digest external pressure, they provide excellent emotional buffering for clients. They are completely capable of sitting in the absolute dark with someone and not being terrified of it.
That's a really powerful image. And finally,
Any role requiring deep observation and patience. Jobs where you have to quietly watch a complex situation unfold over a very long period to see the true pattern emerge.
it's incredibly clear that while the name sorrowful thinker implies a sort of constant sadness, the everyday reality of this profile is so much more about depth, stability, and protection.
It is entirely about gravitas.
We're coming to the end of our deep dive here. If there is one thing, one final golden sentence that summarizes the true essence of the SSAU, what is it?
The report beautifully caps it off with this thought. When sorrow no longer just becomes internal consumption but transforms into insight and reminder, sorrowful thinkers' quiet and depth becomes an important force protecting others and systems.
That is just profound. It's not about curing or getting rid of the sorrow or the high sensitivity. It's about channeling it, transforming it from something that just eats you up inside into a literal tool that protects everyone around you.
Exactly. Their sorrow, when mastered, is actually a shield.
A shield for the world. I love that. Which actually leaves me with a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We've talked about how valuable this trait is. But look at our modern culture. We're constantly pushed toward toxic positivity, forced optimism, and endless hype. What happens to a society that stops listening to its sorrowful thinkers? If we constantly drown out the people holding the shields, who is going to spot the edge of the cliff?
That is a question worth pre-enacting.
Definitely. And that is where we will leave it for today. This entire deep dive was based on the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It's a truly fascinating system that completely changes how you view these supposedly negative traits.
It really reframes everything. If you found yourself nodding along today thinking, wait, that's exactly how I operate, or maybe that explains my partner perfectly, it's highly worth looking into their materials.
For those of you who want to explore this system further, you can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com. Or, if you're looking to connect on social media, just hop onto Facebook and search for Max Energy or Meta Energy.
That's where you'll find the deeper psychological cuts on all of this.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, whether you are a sorrowful thinker yourself or just someone lucky enough to be protected by one, there is immense strength in the reflection. We'll see you next time.
Take care.